Good morning, Sherwood kids. I am so excited to be with you this morning, even if it's still virtually, but excited to bring you a message this morning. And what a perfect morning for this morning's message. Um, we are talking in the middle of a series called Just the Right Words, and we're talking about words of sorrow this morning. And we're going to be looking at Psalm 39 and Psalm 126 a little bit to help us get there. But I think about, when you think about that word sorrow, I wanted just to give you the definition. So the definition of sorrow is a feeling of deep distress caused by loss, disappointment, or other misfortune suffered by oneself or others. Or it could be to feel or display deep distress. Okay? So what a perfect morning, because rain many times makes us think about we think about rain as a symbol of sorrow or suffering sometimes. And we can't wait for that sun to shine again. We can't wait for the rain to end. And we kind of think about that a lot of times in our lives too when it comes to suffering. And how new life rain can bring new life and new growth and things to our plants and flowers and things. So we kind of look at the rain as that sorrow time, getting us to that other time of joy again. And then we also think about tears. Tears are another symbol we think of as sorrow. And scientifically, tears come in there are three types of tears. There are psychic tears, which are both your tears of grief or sadness and tears of joy. Those are both your psychic tears. Then you have basal tears, which happen all the time. It keeps your eyes moistened from drying out. Just tiny quantities kind of are released into your eye to lubricate your eye. And then you have reflex tears, and reflex tears are released in response to, like, if your eyes get irritated, whether it's dust or when you cut an onion or things like that. But we think about tears as this symbol of sorrow. But we have something really important to learn this morning about sorrow and about our words of sorrow that we use during those times. And so we're going to be looking at Psalms again, and in these two Psalms, David, we don't know exactly what's happening. It could still be grieving over his son Absalom and turning against him and things. It could be some other reasons, some other people that are against him, but he's in a moment of sorrow during this time, and so we're going to look at those. But I think it's really, really important as we do that we try to look for what we can learn from David during those times. And just like David, we try to look for what God is teaching us, or is there something we can learn about ourselves or about Him during these tough times, during these times of sorrow or suffering. So something that really stood out to me that I read this morning is that we have to remember that God is sovereign, and in His care for us, right, in that we call that providential care, but in that care for us, He lets nothing come upon us but what will fulfill His good purpose for our lives. And that's sometimes hard to accept when you're in the middle of suffering, that you mean something good. God's allowing me to go through this for something good, but we have to remember God's good purpose that He has for our lives. It may just have that. It may just have suffering in there, right? And you think about, I always try to think about, if He's allowing me to go through this trial or this suffering, if He's allowing me to go through that, it might be because He wants to use that time to teach me something, maybe about how weak I am, maybe about how weak and frail I am emotionally or spiritually, or He wants to teach me and show me something there about how weak I am. But also sometimes He wants us to that to help us to a better reliance on Him, and maybe even a better relationship with Him through that suffering. So He can use those times to teach us a lot of things. And really, I think the most important thing that can happen during suffering is that just like as we grow up, we have less and less dependence on our parents to help us and to teach us and to do things. We start getting more and more independence. A lot of times, God is using this to kind of wean us off of maybe our own fleshly, our own personal world-centered, the things that we maybe place all of our trust in. And He's trying to get us away from those things that we put our trust in, and help us to, rely on Him more. And that's hard, right? We really easily put our place in earthly things, or put our trust in earthly things, and that's the wrong place. And maybe through this suffering, God's helping us to rely on Him more, because really we don't know what else to do. We're suffering, we're hurting, we're sad, we're grieving, and we don't have any other choice. And God's trying to tell us, look at me. Kind of what we talked about a couple weeks ago. He's trying to lift up our chin and say, well, look up to me, and let me be the one that you rely on during these times, and not yourself. So it's kind of a weird thing to say, but maybe suffering is a blessing. Maybe those times of sorrow are really a blessing, because what it's going to do is it's going to cause us to draw closer to God. It's going to cause us to look to Him more. It's going to cause us to trust in Him more, and really it's an awesome part of that gift, that grace that He's given us. It's just an awesome part of that grace that He's given us, is that He wants to draw us closer to that relationship with Him. So I think about that. If during those times when sorrow hits, because they're going to hit, remember we talked about, in this world you will have trouble, but you remember, but take heart, because Jesus has overcame the world. I love that verse. But I think about during those times, if I can look at those times as God's going to help me grow, maybe I can even be thankful for those times of suffering. And that seems really, really weird to say, doesn't it? I can be thankful for times when I'm sad and suffering and sorrows hit. But that's what we're going to think of. We're going to try to look at what David says about it. So Psalm 39 starts off this way. It says, I said, I will watch my ways and keep my tongue from sin. I will put a muzzle on my mouth while in the presence of the wicked. So I remained utterly silent, not even saying anything good. But my anguish increased, my heart grew hot within me. While I meditated, the fire burned. Then I spoke with my tongue. Show me, Lord, my life's end and the number of my days. Let me know how fleeting my life is. You have made my days a mere handbreadth. The span of my years is nothing before you. Everyone is but a breath, even those who seem secure. Surely everyone goes around like a mere phantom. In vain they rush about, heaping up wealth without knowing whose it will finally be. So he starts off, and I love the beginning. Did you hear what David does in the very beginning? He doesn't do anything. He stays silent. And I love that. Silent even in the presence of the wicked. And he remained utterly silent, not even saying anything good. So the first thing that I think that we can learn from David this morning is that when we are suffering, when we are experiencing that sorrow, the first thing we need to do is stay silent. Because it'll do a couple things. People will be watching you, and they're going to see how you're reacting to this suffering, right? And people that are Christ followers and people that aren't are going to be watching. And so David teaches us something really important about stay silent. Stay silent, collect your thoughts, and then you'll be able to speak more clearly and in a better way that really shows others where your heart is. And so David says he sat quiet, like a muzzle on his mouth. And I think, but what did he say? His anguish increased during that time. So it is good eventually that we're going to get that out, but in the very beginning, right? We don't want to act on the emotion. We don't want to act when we're experiencing that deep sorrow, because we might act in a way that is unpleasing to God, and others see that, and others in David's mind use that against him, or may speak against him because of how he reacted. So that's a really, really important part of that, is that we stay silent. And then the first thing he does is he turns to God and he prays. The first thing he does after he stayed silent is he prays, and he acknowledges who God is, and that God knows everything and knows every day of his life and when it's going to end, and he acknowledges who he is before he prays for this time of suffering to end. And then he goes on, but now, Lord, what do I look for? My hope is in you. Save me from all my transgressions. Do not make me the scorn of fools. I was silent. I would not open my mouth, for you are the one who has done this. Remove your scourge from me. I am overcome by the blow of your hand. When you rebuke and discipline anyone for their sin, you consume their wealth like a moth. Surely everyone is but a breath. Hear my prayer, Lord. Listen to my cry for help. Do not be deaf on my weeping. I dwell with you as a foreigner, a stranger, as all my ancestors were. Look away from me that I may enjoy life again before I depart and am no more. And I love that. We want to turn our sorrow over to God. We want to surrender it to God whenever we're going through that time. And then we want to pray. We want to pray and ask God to reveal what it is He wants to teach us, what it is He wants to show us during that time. And that way we don't reply to that in a, God, why me? Why am I having to go through this? But God, why? What do you want me to learn from this? Because remember, we can have joy in that suffering because we know God's teaching us something. And that's going to help draw us closer to Him in our relationship with Him. So I want to just touch really quickly on the other part of today's. You're going to hear if you listen to the sermon, Psalm 126. And I just want to read these couple verses because this kind of brings our tears talk full circle. It says, "Those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying seed to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them." And I think that's true. Those times of suffering help us really appreciate those times of joy. And when we go through those moments of sorrow and suffering, it helps us to put our focus on God. And that's going to bring out joy. That's going to help us to see joy around us instead of looking around us and seeing everything that's wrong in our world and in our lives. We can focus on God. And that relationship will bring that joy back to the forefront of our lives. So make sure today you tell your fathers and grandfathers and uncles and all the fathers that you know in your life, make sure you tell them Happy Father's Day. And make sure that you check out today our hangout time together, and then we have several of you are finishing up joining God's family today, so we're excited about that too. So I hope you have a great week, and remember, even in the tears, even in the rain, the sun is coming, the joy is coming, and help us look to God during those times. Love you guys. We'll see you soon.